Over the past 100 days, I did the unthinkable, raising up an army of fire ants starting from a single queen. Extremely aggressive, swarm tactic type of ants capable of overwhelming any type of prey they come across. But it all started on day 1 when I was on the hunt for a queen ant. And it looks like the weather conditions are perfect for a nuptial flight, when newly hatched male and queen ants fly out of their nest to mate in the air. This is the most crucial time for us to find a queen ant, because most of them will become snacks for the creatures that soar through the skies. If I can't find a queen, I'll have to wait a full year until they fly again. And so, I took a stroll to where I knew I could find queen ants. The pool. Ants are terrible flyers, so when they're caught by the wind, they go wherever it takes them. Oftentimes, you'll find them floating lifelessly on bodies of water. But don't let this fool you. Thanks to an ant's spiracles, or tiny holes in their exoskeleton, they can survive long periods submerged underwater as long as they are able to dry off. Luckily, this case turned out in my favor, as I ended up saving 2 fire ant queens, one with wings who we'll name Zephyrah, and one without named Lavina. Our next step is to leave them in the dark so they can lay eggs in peace. But little did I know, something tragic would happen that I would have no control over. 1 week later, I took a peek into our queen's chambers. Both of them had successfully laid their first batch of eggs. These would soon hatch and become larvae. Or so, I thought, because only a week later, I found one of the queens on her side, taking her final breath. Lavina had eaten her eggs, and probably due to the immense guilt, she knew it wasn't right for her to stay. But in all seriousness, the eggs were probably not fertile, and instead trophic eggs, which are meant to be eaten as food. Or our queen here was just not healthy enough. Rest in peace, Lavina. You won't be forgotten. A few weeks have passed and Zephyrah's eggs have hatched into larvae. Now with movable mouthparts, they can feed off their mother's reserves she absorbed from her wing muscles. This process, known as histolysis, renders her wings functionless, so she can finally remove them. You can't remove that cotton though. I could tell from the moment she removed her wings, she would carry on the torch and create an empire. She was already showing traits of determination as she would care for her eggs one moment and fiercely defend them the next at the slightest disturbance. As days were transitioning into weeks, everything outside her small chamber was changing. It was repetition that would mean life or death. If she's unable to raise her first workers, the chances of her survival decrease dramatically. There's only so much food a queen can feed her young from histolysis that laying and feeding another batch of eggs is unlikely. Zephyrah needs all the time and silence she can get if I want her to have a healthy upbringing. By day 27, she was fully settled in, surrounded by her developing brood. Looks like some of them have been eating well, by the looks of their yellowish tint. And taking a closer look, would you look at that? The first pupae have started to emerge. In some ant species, after the larvae have grown to a certain point, they will spin cocoons to protect themselves as their exoskeleton hardens. For this species, they're just naked. Either way, it's a clear sign we're closer than ever to seeing our first workers. We just have to let them cook for a few more weeks, and they'll slowly become a darker color. Then, it finally happened. Our Majesty's first generation of workers, called nanitics, have taken their first steps into the world. As far as they know it, this is all they know until I expand their hunting grounds into something far more expansive in the future. I gave them a glob of honey for the time being, so they can have more energy for what I'll be feeding them soon. And in goes 2 small leafhoppers I recently took out of the freezer. While they feast on their first meals, I began building their next home, a tubs and tube setup, giving them more space for ease of access to more water and food. Unfortunately, however, the colony had lost a couple workers while I was away from home. The lack of food and water took a massive hit to the colony, and they slowly dwindled out. It was a tough time for me because I let another colony fall victim to a careless mistake. So I made sure next time, I would do everything in my power to raise up the next queen. And by the time next ant season approached, I was ready. And you should be too. If you're looking for ant outworlds, formicariums, t-shirts, stickers, or other kinds of merchandise, you can find it all at the top of the description at enderants.com. With another rotation around the sun, came another opportunity to raise an empire. I would not let the past repeat itself. Now all settled into her new home, our Royal Majesty already laid a few eggs, but we need to give her more time to nurture her babies before we can check on her again. Quickly, her egg pile grew to a considerable size. And 2 weeks later, she had her first worker hatch. By day 25, the time had come. I had to prepare for the colony to explode in numbers, or else feeding them in a small tube would risk them escaping. Wasting an opportunity at freedom is not something fire ants would take lightly. 10 days later, the first workers set foot in new lands. Now, over a month has passed since the queen's first eggs were laid, leaving 65 more days left in this journey. If you made it this far, obliterate that like button and comment below what we should name this queen. Because before you know it, finding her among her colony may take years. Southern fire ant colonies can get up to 100,000 workers in a single colony if given enough food. Although it may look like this colony only has a few workers, they are still known to grow quickly in the ant kingdom. And less than a week later, the first generation was born and actively doing their ant duties. This moment called for celebration in the form of a cricket feast. However, after this video was taken, I ended up going on a short trip during my summer break, and then I remembered the last time I went away. So I gathered all of my ant colonies together and stocked up on water. All I could do was hope and pray that my beloved ants would not be taken away. And by the time I returned, it was day 74. Their first test tube was nearly full of ants, and the brood pile was larger than ever before. There had to be at least over 100 baby ants in there, of all stages of life. I couldn't have felt more relieved. To better protect their home, the workers have constructed a sand door at the entrance. Most of my ant colonies do this in order to better protect their nest from intruders, maintain humidity inside, or both. During this time, I would consistently give them small fish food, which they would absolutely love to bring inside their nest. It would pile up right next to their eggs. I wouldn't be surprised to see another population boom in the coming weeks. Everything was looking great. The colony grew large enough to fill 2 test tubes, and there looked to be no end to the eggs the queen would lay. There were even a couple major workers, larger ants that are built for defending the colony and tearing off insect parts that are hard to chew through. And by the time it was day 100, the growth didn't seem to have an end. From finding our first queens 1 whole year ago, to having their first batch of eggs, to the death of Queen Lavina, and then raising up Queen Zephyra to her first workers, only for her colony to slowly die off by my own hands. With all things, the first steps are always the most difficult. Once you overcome those initial challenges, everything else will be smooth sailing. But if you're not responsible enough, nature will run its course. I've kept other ants before, all with their own unique traits and quirks. But fire ants, on the other hand, are an entirely different experience. As you've seen, they can quickly outgrow their homes, and if you're not careful, they can escape and venture over your desk at a moment's notice. Now that we've seen what this colony is capable of, we have to keep the momentum going. This small setup they're in right now will only keep them contained for so long, but now that our queen has begun laying her next round of eggs for the season, I have to stay prepared for what's to come next. They needed to be moved into something bigger if I wanted to keep feeding them lots of food. Cleaning out their trash without workers flooding out the tubes would need to be solved, and also give me peace of mind. The last thing I would want is hundreds of fire ants escaping into my bed. They needed an upgrade. But something was bothering me. The colony had started moving slower, egg production had slowed down, and most of all, they were huddled in one test tube. Were workers dying out? They usually only live a couple months to half a year, so maybe the first generation had finally met their time. But there should be a lot more of them. They just filled up a second tube just a few weeks ago. The answer was simple. Winter was coming.